The night I found out my wife was going to kill me, she kissed me on the forehead and told me not to forget my vitamins. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the betrayal, not the lies, that kiss. Because her lips were warm, and her voice was soft, and she smelled like the woman I had loved for 31 years, and none of it was real. Not 1 second of it. I want you to stay with me on this, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about marriage, about family, about the people you trust most in this world. I'm going to be honest with you from the beginning. There were signs. There are always signs. I just wasn't looking. My name is Gerald, and at 59 years old, I was living in a 3-bedroom house on Camellia Drive in East Atlanta with my wife Donna, who I had married the summer before I turned 28. 31 years. We had raised 2 kids in that house, buried a dog in that backyard, repainted the kitchen 4 times because Donna could never quite decide on the right shade of yellow. I knew her, or I thought I did. That's the part that still keeps me up some nights, not that she fooled the world, but that she fooled me. The man who knew the sound of her breathing when she slept. The changes started in August, not with anything dramatic. Nothing you could point to and say, there, that's where it went wrong. It started with Donna coming home from work on Friday nights smelling different. She worked administrative intake at a regional healthcare office over on Memorial Drive, and she had always come home carrying a particular combination of recycled office air and whatever tea she drank at her desk. But starting that August, she came home smelling floral. Sweet in a way I couldn't name. I mentioned it once, casually, and she told me one of the women in her department had started using a new perfume and it clung to everything. That explanation sat fine with me for about 2 weeks. Then I noticed her clothes. Donna was meticulous. Always had been. But she was coming home on these Friday evenings with her blouse pulled slightly off center, her hair not quite how she had fixed it that morning, her lipstick completely gone rather than just faded. When I brought it up, she laughed and said long days did that to a person. Then she went upstairs and showered. I told myself I was reading into things. That's what you do when you've been married that long. You explain away the things that bother you because the alternative is a conversation you're not ready to have. So I explained. And explained. And kept explaining. Right up until the night, a stranger on my own porch told me to pay attention to a broken streetlight. He was young, maybe 22 or 23, with a red delivery bag slung over one arm. He had the wrong address looking for Peachtree Lane, which is 4 blocks over, and he apologized and turned to leave. But then he stopped. He looked back at me standing in my doorway, and something in his expression shifted. It went from polite and distracted to careful, deliberate. He said my name. He didn't know my name, of course. He just said sir, but the way he said it made me listen. He told me he had been running deliveries in this part of East Atlanta for going on 3 years. He said you see things in a neighborhood when you move through it at night. Things people don't realize someone is watching. And then he pointed to the streetlight at the corner of Camellia and Ridgewood, the one that had been flickering for months without the city fixing it, and he told me that light went dark most Friday nights around 11:30, and that if I was still awake when it did, I would understand some things I didn't currently understand. Then he walked away. I stood in my doorway for a long time after his taillights disappeared. The night was warm, the way Atlanta nights are in the fall, still holding the day's heat even past 10 o'clock. I looked at that streetlight. It was burning steadily, throwing its yellow circle onto the sidewalk and the edge of my front yard. It looked completely normal. And I thought, a 22-year-old pizza driver just gave me cryptic instructions about my own marriage, and I'm standing here taking it seriously. But I didn't go back inside. I turned off every light in the front of the house and settled into the armchair near the window. The street was quiet. A few houses down, I noticed Mrs. Calloway's living room curtains were open at an angle they weren't usually open, with her silhouette in the chair behind them. Across the street, there was movement in an upstairs window at the Preston's place. At the time, I wrote it off as coincidence. I understand now that it wasn't. Donna had left for her late budget meeting at 6:15. She was wearing a dress I had given her for her birthday, and she looked beautiful. And she had kissed me goodbye in that way she had quick, familiar, the kind of kiss that says I know you'll be here when I get back. Now, sitting in the dark watching a streetlight, I was thinking about that kiss differently. The light began to flicker at 11:26. Each time it went dark, it stayed dark a little longer than before 5 seconds, then 8, then nearly 15. And in those stretches of darkness, I began to see the street differently. A car I didn't recognize had been parked 2 houses down for the past hour, a dark sedan with tinted windows. While the light was steady, I hadn't noticed it. In the dark, I saw it clearly. Then I heard Donna's car. I know that engine like I know my own voice. There's a particular vibration in the idle that our mechanic has been meaning to fix for 2 years. But she didn't turn into the driveway. She rolled slowly past our house and parked 50 feet up the street, in the exact stretch of shadow that the broken light was leaving on the pavement. She turned the engine off, and she just sat there. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs and made myself breathe. She's on the phone. That was the first excuse my brain offered. She's finishing a call and doesn't want to wake you up by coming in. But she wasn't on the phone. I could see the faint glow of her car's interior, and she was just sitting there, completely still, watching the road. A white pickup truck turned onto Camellia from the far end, moving slowly, headlights dimmed. It stopped directly in front of our house. A man got out of the driver's side, tall, broad shoulders, dark clothes. He moved with a kind of unhurried purpose that told me he had been here before. He walked to the passenger side and opened the door. Donna got out of the passenger seat of that truck. For a moment, I couldn't process it. She had driven her own car, it was right there. 50 feet away, I had just watched her park it. So she had gotten out of her own car, walked up the street in the dark, and climbed into this man's truck. Which meant she had done this before. Which meant every time she came home on those late nights, there had been a version of this. A version she had managed perfectly while I sat in the living room reading or watching television or simply trusting her. She trusted me to not look. They stood close together beside the truck, speaking in low voices. Then she reached up and put her arms around him, and he pulled her in, and it was not the hug of two people who have just finished a meeting. It was the embrace of people who know each other in a way I had believed was reserved only for her and me. I wanted to walk outside. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to walk out there and end the performance, to make them see me standing in the light of my own porch looking at what they were doing. But I didn't. I don't know exactly why. Some combination of shock and self-preservation, maybe. Some part of me that understood even then that what I was watching was not an affair. Because when they separated, the man walked to the truck bed and began unloading something large. Several items, wrapped in heavy plastic and bound with tape. Donna helped carry them. They were careful about it, deliberate. And they went around the side of the house toward the backyard. I moved to the kitchen. The back door has a small window, and I positioned myself to one side of it so I could see out without being visible from the yard. They had set up a work light, the kind you see at construction sites, but positioned low and partially covered, casting just enough illumination to work by without throwing light above the fence line. And then I saw the man's face clearly. It was my brother Terrence. Terrence, who lived 40 minutes away in Marietta. Terrence, who had called me 3 months ago crying about his divorce, about his debts, about needing to borrow $8,000 because he was going to lose his apartment. I had transferred that money the same afternoon without hesitation. Because he was my brother. They unwrapped the packages. Multiple items, handled carefully. Donna produced a folding camp shovel from one of the bags. She and Terrence moved to the back corner of the yard, near the storage shed, where our privacy fence blocked the view from every neighboring house, and they began to dig. I stood at that window and felt something leave my body. Not fear, not yet. Something quieter than that. The slow, terrible departure of every assumption I had made about my own life. "How much longer are we going to need the Fridays?" Donna asked. Her voice was low, but the night was still, and I caught every word. "A few more weeks at most," Terrence said. "The dosage is building up the way Peterson said it would. Gerald's already showing the fatigue symptoms. I had been tired for months. I had been sleeping poorly, waking disoriented in the middle of the night, feeling a persistent heaviness in my chest that I had attributed to stress, to age, to not exercising enough. I had mentioned it to Donna once, and she had nodded sympathetically and reminded me to take my vitamins. My vitamins. "The paperwork is in order?" Terrence asked. "All of it," Donna said. "The additional policy is filed. His signature is on everything." She paused. "I've been practicing it for 8 months. No one will question it. And Peterson is confirmed for Saturday? Saturday night. He'll bring the equipment. Once Gerald is sedated deeply enough, Peterson can induce the episode and certify the cause in under an hour." She stopped digging for a moment. "By Monday afternoon, I discover him. By Tuesday, the investigation is closed. How much are we looking at total? Between the life policy, the pension, and the house, roughly $700,000 after fees. Your share is 35%. I backed away from the window. I want to try to describe what it feels like to hear your wife calculate the value of your death, but I honestly don't have the words. There's no framework for it. You spend 31 years building a life with a person you know their coffee order, their shoe size, the specific way they laugh when something actually surprises them, and then you stand in your own kitchen in the dark and hear that voice, that familiar voice, putting a dollar amount on the day you stop breathing. I made it back to the living room recliner, and I sat down and I made myself go completely still. When the back door opened quietly 20 minutes later, I was arranged in the chair with my eyes half closed, breathing slow, every muscle performing sleep. Donna came to the doorway and watched me for a moment. Then she whispered my name. I let myself stir, let my eyes open with the confusion of someone just waking. She crossed the room and kissed my forehead, and her lips were warm and her voice was gentle when she said she was sorry for being so late. The meeting had run long. Budget discussions, I said. The usual, she said. Exhausting. I looked at her and I said the only thing I could say without breaking. I said, I'm glad you're home. If you have ever had to look directly at someone who was lying to you and respond as though the lie were true, if you have ever held your face together while everything inside you was falling apart, then you understand what those 4 words cost me. They were the most expensive words I've ever spoken. She reminded me to take my vitamins in the morning and went upstairs. I sat in that chair until I heard her breathing settle into sleep on the baby monitor we had never bothered to remove from the hallway. Then I got up very quietly, went to the kitchen, and stood over the sink for a long time. I thought about every Friday night for the past 3 months, every forehead kiss, every warm dinner, every gentle reminder about my heart health and my family history. My father had died of cardiac arrest at 62, my grandfather at 60. Donna had known those numbers. She had comforted me about those numbers, and then she had used them as the architecture for my murder. The next morning I drove to see my attorney, a man named Douglas Park, who had handled our wills and real estate closings for 15 years. I asked him, before I said anything else, whether Donna had contacted him recently about updating any of our financial documents. There was a pause on his side of the desk. No, Douglas said. Not in over 2 years. She had been working with someone else then, someone who could forge documents and file fraudulent insurance amendments without triggering any questions. I told Douglas everything. He went pale somewhere around the part about the backyard. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment and then said, very carefully, that I needed to understand we could not go to the police yet. I already knew that. What I had was circumstantial overheard conversation, a forged signature I couldn't yet prove, a vitamin bottle with a label I couldn't have analyzed without tipping my hand. The moment Donna sensed police involvement, everything would disappear. She had been building this for months. She would dismantle the evidence in hours if she needed to. And then she would sit across from investigators and describe her husband as a paranoid, emotionally deteriorating man with a documented family history of cardiac disease and conveniently symptoms to match. Douglas knew a private investigator named Camille Ross. He called her while I sat in his office. Over the next week, Camille documented everything. She followed Donna to a medical office suite in Buckhead, where a man calling himself Dr. Richard Farrow was operating without a current state license. She photographed Terrence arriving from Marietta every Friday morning and meeting with both Donna and Farrow. She tracked the 3 of them to a storage facility off I-285, where they were keeping medical equipment, cardiac monitoring devices, a defibrillation unit that had been modified in ways Camille described as deeply abnormal. They weren't just going to let the medication do its work. They were going to induce a heart attack, manually. Using equipment that Farrow, who had lost his license in another state for insurance fraud, would then use to sign a death certificate claiming natural causes. Camille found records suggesting this was not Farrow's first time doing this for money. 3 other people, 3 other deaths, in other cities, years ago, that nobody had connected. When Camille showed me those photographs on a Thursday afternoon, I sat in her car and did not speak for a long time. I want to be honest with you, I don't know that I fully believed in the depth of human calculation before that moment. I had seen greed. I had seen people do terrible things for money or out of rage. But this was something else. This was a project. A managed, scheduled, professionally resourced project with timelines and contingency planning and a cleanup protocol. A project whose deliverable was my absence from the world. Camille said she believed Saturday was the night. I went home and made dinner. I want to tell you something about those last 2 days, because I think this is the part of the story that most people can't fully imagine. I went home knowing what was planned for Saturday night, and I cooked pasta, and I asked Donna about her week, and I laughed at something she said about a colleague's bad haircut, and we watched television together on the couch, and I held it together. Every hour I told myself, you are alive right now. Stay alive. I had stopped taking the vitamins 6 days earlier. I was purging whatever she put in my food or drinks within minutes of taking them, in the upstairs bathroom while she was downstairs. The fog in my head was lifting. The chest heaviness was easing. My body was slowly recovering from months of systematic poisoning, and I had to perform feeling worse than I actually felt so she would believe the medication was still working. Saturday evening, Donna brought me coffee at 8 o'clock. She was particular about which mug she handed me. She sat close to me on the couch, and I could feel her monitoring me the way your breathing changes, the way your body relaxes when sedation starts to take hold. I knew what was in that coffee. I drank it slowly, let 20 minutes pass, then excused myself and went to the kitchen. When I came back, I let my movements go loose and deliberate. I let my voice thicken just slightly when I spoke. I watched Donna's expression shift into something that was almost relief. She suggested I go upstairs and lie down. I went. I lay on our bed in the dark, on top of the covers, fully dressed, wearing a recording device that Douglas had arranged for me to borrow from a former law enforcement contact. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs, the same thing I'd done in the armchair watching the street, and I breathed, and I waited, and I thought about 31 years. Here is what I thought about specifically. I thought about the night our daughter was born, and how Donna had gripped my hand so hard during labor that I had a bruise for a week afterward, and how I had been so proud of that bruise. I thought about the time I was laid off in 2009, and Donna had taken a second job at a grocery store without complaining, just so we could keep the house. I thought about a Tuesday morning 2 years ago when I brought her coffee in bed, and she looked at me over the rim of the cup and said, completely unprompted, "I'm happy." Just that. I'm happy. And I had believed her. When had it turned? Had there been a specific moment, a specific grievance, a specific decision? Or had it been a slow accumulation, a life she had stopped choosing? Resentment that had been composting for years until it became something unrecognizable? I heard the back door open at 9:47. Hushed voices in the kitchen, the soft sound of equipment being set down, then footsteps on the stairs, 3 sets, not one. Our bedroom door opened. Donna came in first, then Terrence, then a man I had never seen who moved with the careful confidence of someone in a professional context. Pharaoh. He carried a case. He set it on the floor beside the bed and opened it with quiet efficiency, the way a surgeon sets out instruments. Donna leaned over me and checked my pulse with 2 fingers against my wrist. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume, that same floral scent I had first noticed in August, the one she had told me was a coworker's. "He's under," she said softly. "Pulse is slow and steady." "Good," Pharaoh said. "The sedation level is optimal." He began attaching small electrodes to my chest with a practiced efficiency. "Once I initiate the sequence, cardiac arrest will occur within approximately 40 seconds. The signature will be indistinguishable from a natural event." "No pain?" Donna asked. Pharaoh paused for just a moment. "None," he said. "He won't experience any of it." And there it was. The one question she had asked. Not, "Are you sure this will work, or are we certain no one will know?" She had asked if I would feel pain. I have thought about that question many times since. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it makes her more human or less. "Terms are still as agreed," Terrence said from the foot of the bed. "My percentage. And your fee. And no contact between us after tonight." "As agreed," Pharaoh said. He reached for the device. I sat up. The sound Donna made was not a scream. It was smaller than that, a sharp exhalation, the sound a person makes when the ground moves unexpectedly beneath them. She stumbled back against the dresser. Terrence went still in the way people go, still when their brain hasn't caught up to what their eyes are seeing. Pharaoh's hand froze over the device. "I heard every word," I said. My voice was steady, steadier than I expected. "Every word from the backyard last Friday. Every word from this room tonight." I held up the recording device. All of it. The siren started less than a minute later. Camille had been in a vehicle on Camellia Drive with eyes on the house. Douglas had coordinated with Atlanta PD, who were staged 4 blocks away waiting for my signal. The signal was me sitting up in that bed. The bedroom filled with police officers. Commands were given. Hands went behind backs. Donna looked at me from across the room and her face had gone completely flat, all the warmth drained out of it, all the performance finished. What was left underneath was something I didn't recognize. Something cold and thorough. 31 years, she said. "I know," I said. "I know exactly how long it's been." She didn't say anything else. They let her out. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the room emptied. The house was full of voices and activity, and I was completely still in the center of it. I thought about the blueberry pancakes she used to make on Saturday mornings. I thought about the shade of yellow in the kitchen that she had never quite decided on. I thought about the Tuesday morning she looked at me over her coffee cup and said, "I'm happy." I think she meant it then. I do. I think somewhere in the years between that morning and this one, something corroded that I will never fully understand. And I have had to make peace with not understanding it, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life trying to locate the exact moment the woman I loved became the person who tried to kill me. That's not a question I can afford to live inside. The trial lasted 11 days. Donna received a life sentence. Terrence, who had no prior record and testified partially on his own behalf, received 22 years. Farrow, once investigators connected him to 3 previous deaths in other states, was sentenced under federal statute in a separate proceeding that I was not required to attend and did not. I sold the house on Camellia Drive 6 months later. I live in a small place outside Asheville now, up in the North Carolina mountains where the nights are genuinely dark, no streetlights, no neighbors close enough to see my windows. I have a porch where I drink my coffee in the morning and watch the ridge go from black to gray to green as the sun comes up. I am 60 years old and I am alive, and most days that feels like enough. This story is not really about betrayal. I know it looks like a betrayal story from the outside, but what it actually is, I think, is a story about attention. About the moments when something small and wrong catches your eye, and you decide to either look directly at it or explain it away. I explained things away for months. I told myself the smell was someone else's perfume, the wrinkled blouse was just a long day, the secrecy was stress. The mistake most people make is not that they miss the signs. It's that they identify the signs, feel the discomfort of them, and then work very hard to make that discomfort go away by accepting the easiest available explanation. We do that because the alternative, looking directly at what we fear might be true, costs too much. I understand that instinct. I lived it for months. What saved my life was a stranger who told me to keep my eyes open and not move until I understood what I was seeing. That's all. Keep your eyes open. Don't look away before you understand. I want to ask you something before I close, and I want you to actually sit with it. Is there anything in your life right now that you have been explaining away? A small wrong thing you have given a convenient story to because looking at it directly would cost too much? I'm not talking about marriages or murder. I'm talking about the everyday version of the thing I did, the small acts of self-deception that we perform to maintain peace, to avoid confrontation, to protect an image of our lives that we're not ready to give up. Sometimes the streetlight going out is the best thing that ever happens to you. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment with one if you believe Gerald did the right thing waiting and gathering evidence before going to police. Drop 2 if you think he should have called law enforcement the moment he overheard that backyard conversation. Drop 3 if you're honestly not sure if this story left you with more questions than answers, like it did for me the first time I sat down with it. Also tell me what city or country you're watching from and what time it is where you are, because I find myself genuinely wondering who is on the other side of this. And if you have ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely turned out to be something entirely different, you don't have to share details, just know that I see you, and I believe you, and I'm glad you're still here. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe and come back. I will keep bringing you stories like this one, stories that are uncomfortable and real and worth sitting with. I'll see you next time. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.